Alex Wren had always been drawn to the shadows of urban legend, to the murmur of secrets behind darkened screens and whispered forum threads. A journalist with an insatiable curiosity, as well as a detective's instinct to probe the unknown, Alex had built a career chasing down stories that danced on the edges of reality and myth. Recently, however, something new had caught the wind, a fragment of a rumor that made even the staunchest skeptic pause and lean in a little closer. It started with a series of anonymous messages and cryptic social media posts that emerged late one autumn evening. While scrolling through a niche online forum dedicated to unsolved mysteries and rare phenomena, Alex noticed a thread titled simply, "The Sound Test." The post claimed that a leaked audio file was circulating the deep corners of the internet. What made it extraordinary wasn't a startling melody or a clenched rhythm. It was, instead, the claim that the sound had a maddening quality. People who had listened reported either vanishing without a trace, falling into eerie silence, or even speaking in hushed tones, divulging secrets about strangers and acquaintances alike. Alex's pulse quickened. There was a peculiar allure in the idea, a sound so powerful that it altered its listeners, left ripples in the common psyche, and perhaps even heralded unseen consequences. The initial online chatter was dismissive, labeling it as a hoax, a digital parlor trick meant to garner attention. But under that superficial dismissal lay layers of perplexing first-hand accounts. The forum posts were interspersed with eyewitness reports, a university student in a small town suddenly muttering names and dates with eerie accuracy, or a middle-aged librarian whose quiet existence was shattered after a brief encounter with the recording. That night, Alex sat hunched over a battered desk in the dim glow of a desk lamp, scrolling through the thread and letting the gravity of the whispers sink in. Each fragment of testimony was laced with uncertainty, yet the tone was unmistakable, a dread that resonated deep inside their core. It wasn't just the prospect of a dangerous signal, it was the underlying horror of a power beyond simple understanding, a phenomenon that might bridge the gap between rationality and chaos. Over the next several days, Alex dove headfirst into the digital echoes surrounding the mysterious leak. Between furtive messages from unknown users and fragmented audio clips shared in encrypted chats, the trail of clues was tantalizing. One particular clip, low in quality and marred by static, offered a glimpse into what many described as an otherworldly vibration. Alex's first encounter with it was confined to the safety of their home office, with windows bolted and the television off, a controlled environment that seemed, at least for a moment, to offer insulation from the enigma. With a deep breath, Alex clicked play. At first, nothing but a thinning wind of sound passed through the speakers. Then, almost imperceptibly, a gentle rhythm began to unfold. It wasn't a deliberate beat or a cadence that one could easily follow. Instead, the sound ebbed and flowed, as if painted by an unseen hand upon the canvas of silence. An irregular pattern of low pulses intermingled with barely audible overtones created a texture that was at once unnerving and magnetic. For several long minutes, Alex sat transfixed, feeling as though the sound was speaking directly to the hidden corners of their mind. There was an undeniable sensation of being observed, as if the auditory phenomenon carried an intelligence, a silent witness to secrets best left unspoken. As the recording ended, Alex's heart thumped in their chest, and the room fell into an oppressive stillness. In the quiet that followed, thoughts raced. How could a mere arrangement of sound waves cause such a profound and unsettling effect? What mysterious mechanism lay behind this phenomenon that would reportedly change the lives of its listeners? Alex's rational mind attempted to break apart the experience into scientific terms, a quirk of acoustics perhaps, or a cleverly engineered psychological trigger designed to disorient the mind. Yet, a lingering, inexplicable dread refused to be dissected away. The following morning, Alex's day was filled with the residue of that disturbing night. At a local cafe where the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with murmurs of early morning conversation, Alex found it difficult to focus. Their thoughts kept returning to the eerie quality of the sound and the possibility that it held far deeper implications. The captivating thread of the sound test had already infected the minds of many, and the journalist within Alex wondered if they were facing not simply a digital fairy tale, but a phenomenon with the potential to unravel the safety and normality of everyday life. In reaching out to a few trusted contacts, experts in audio engineering, cognitive science, and even folklore specialists, Alex compiled snippets of information that both reassured and unnerved them. One audio technician mentioned that a similar phenomenon had been documented in rare auditory experiments during the late days of analog recording technology. A psychologist recalled an obscure study on how certain frequencies could trigger deeply repressed memories or even alter a person's emotional state. And the folklore expert emphasized that throughout history, there have been accounts of cursed sounds and voices from beyond that manipulated human perception and behavior. Amid these investigations, Alex's own circle of friends began to show signs of curiosity mixed with trepidation. One close friend, Remy, had become strangely silent ever since overhearing fragments of the leak during a casual conversation. Once vibrant with laughter and stories, Remy now often spoke in low, hurried tones, as if guarding secrets too weighty to be shared openly. These changes sharpened the personal stakes for Alex, blurring the lines between professional research and an unsettling premonition that something or someone was already at work in their world. Determined to peel back the layers of this auditory mystery, Alex began meticulously cataloging everything. Every whispered forum post, every cryptic message, every eerie personal account. With the notebook filled page by page with observations, Alex set up a basic recording of the archived audio, fragment, and experimented with various playback devices in an effort to identify even the slightest hidden message within the static. Each attempt only deepened the sense of enigma. There was always that inexplicable moment, a pause at the right frequency, a hidden modulation, suggesting that the sound was crafted with purpose, that it was not simply random noise, but perhaps her coded utterance containing some message, even if decipherable only to those who dared listen. Late one rainy evening, as the city's neon lights blurred against sheets of rain and puddles on asphalt, Alex sat once more before the softly humming speakers. The storm outside was a muted symphony of its own, a natural accompaniment to the electronic mystery that now consumed so much of their waking thought. It was in this solitude that Alex wondered if the leak itself was more than just an elaborate hoax or a viral urban legend. Perhaps it was a deliberate needle inserted into the fabric of public consciousness, a test to see how far human curiosity and vulnerability could be stretched. What if each listening was, in fact, a subtle invitation to pierce the veil of normalcy and glimpse a darker continuum existing just beneath the surface of everyday life? As the night deepened and the rain drummed a steady cadence against the window, Alex's mind churned with a mix of investigative determination and an undeniable shiver of foreboding. Every unanswered question posed a challenge that beckoned deeper inquiry, and yet, with each step closer to the truth, there lay the risk of crossing an invisible threshold, a point of no return where the distinction between sound and madness blurred into terrifying ambiguity. In those quiet, contemplative hours, as the storm raged outside like a chorus of suppressed emotions, Alex made a silent vow to follow the trail of the sound test, no matter where it led, even if it meant confronting the darkest recesses of human perception. This was not merely an investigation, but a quest to understand a phenomenon that seemed to bridge the gap between the tangible world and a mysterious, unseen realm. For the first time, the line between personal fear and professional duty merged into one relentless drive, a commitment to unmask the truth, no matter how disconcerting or transformative it might prove to be. Thus, as dawn crept in and the city began to stir, Alex emerged from that night forever altered. The streets were bathed in early light, but every sound, every murmur in the urban pulse echoed with hints of the secret that Alex now carried like an ember. An ember that, if stoked, threatened to set ablaze not only the familiar contours of reality, but also the very fabric of human understanding. Little did Alex know, this investigation was only the beginning of a descent into mysteries that would upend lives, reveal forbidden knowledge, and ultimately blur the lines between sanity and madness. The leak had been but a whisper, a delicate drop in the endless ocean of digital secrets, but it had awakened something far more profound. A beckoning call to traverse into the labyrinth of the unknown, where every sound might be a clue and every silence a warning. That evening, as twilight collapsed into a tapestry of deep indigo and encroaching shadows, Alex prepared for a second encounter, this time in the sanctuary of isolation. With meticulous care, every precaution was taken. The room was stripped of extraneous sounds. Heavy drapes draped the window, and every electronic device not essential lay silent. Alex arranged an array of recording equipment and multiple playback devices, a calculated attempt to capture every nuance of the phenomenon that had already unsettled the mind. Sitting before a freshly calibrated audio player, Alex's hands trembled as they loaded the audio file onto the system. The atmosphere was dense, charged with anticipation. It was as if the room itself waited, its silence pregnant with possibility, with the promise of revelations or madness. The same low-quality snippet, a cacophony of static intertwined with curious beats, filled the space. As the recording commenced, a peculiar hush fell upon the moment. It was an anticipation that transcended ordinary expectation. At first, the EI sound was only a barely perceptible murmur, like the very whisper of wind through stiff branches, or the distant hum of a far-off city. Yet gradually, the arrangement of sounds began to unfold in patterns that defied natural explanation. Alex noted how the low bass pulses shifted in intensity, punctuated by fleeting, almost ghostly overtones. For a single moment, it felt as though the sound was alive, a living entity playing a game of manipulation with the human mind. Alex leaned forward, pressing their ear against a pair of high-fidelity headphones that promised a clearer reception of these spectral frequencies. The initial surge of sound was gentle, a subtle swell that might have been mistaken for the monotony of ambient noise. But then, gradually, the sound awakened. An uncanny series of auditory cues began to emerge, an irregular blend of harmonies that felt at once mechanical and eerily organic. A buzzing tangibly threaded its way through the low notes, as if an unseen force were communicating across frequencies beyond the ordinary range. The sensation was not only heard but felt, resonating deep within the core of Alex's awareness. A shiver ran along the spine of the room, and Alex's thoughts trailed into a labyrinth of simultaneous scientific inquiry and primal dread. Every rational calculation of waveform and frequency oscillated against an undeniable, almost visceral response. A rising tide of emotions too profound for every logical explanation. It was as if the sound penetrated the very fabric of reality, a sonic echo that carried the weight of unspoken secrets and half-forgotten terrors. Time began to lose meaning. Minutes stretched into eternities. Alex's surroundings blurred, the high-tech monitors, the scribbled notes. Even the faint hum of the recorder became mere background to the overwhelming sensory experience. The sound seemed to invite an internal dialogue, an exchange with an indefinable presence. In that moment, memories long suppressed fluttered through Alex's mind. Childhood recollections of nights when strange, unaccountable noises had haunted. Their dreams and inexplicable sensations of being watched had nudged the boundaries of waking life. The phenomenon was accompanied by a series of ephemeral voices, not distinct words, but fragmented syllables that dissolved as quickly as they emerged. They were utterly foreign, as if spoken by someone or something from a realm untouched by human language. Some fragments carried a familiarity, whispers of names and phrases that Alex had never heard yet felt uncannily personal. The effect was a disorienting cocktail of warmth and alienation, as though a secret archive of the innermost self had been unlocked without permission. Alex's heart pounded, each beat echoing the irregular cadence of the sound. There was a profound conflict between the desire to understand and a rising awareness of vulnerability. Was this phenomenon a mere artifact of manipulated sound waves, or was it a deliberate messaging device crafted to disturb the tranquility of the mind? In those raw moments, every scientific theory was reassembled into a passionate, almost desperate search for answers. Alex's mind, normally so orderly and methodical, began to entangle with a world where logic bent under the weight of the inexplicable. After what felt like an inexhaustible duration, the recording finally tapered off. The abrupt absence of sound was as jarring as the crescendo that preceded it. A profound silence settled around Alex, an overwhelming void that seemed to amplify every internal thought and emotion. For several long, shuddering moments, the auditory residue clung to the air, echoing faintly as if reluctant to depart. Alex sat still, absorbing an aftertaste of sound that felt both invigorating and terrifying. When the immediate echo of the recording faded, Alex's senses were left reeling, with questions that no simple explanation could satisfy. What was it about that blend of frequencies that resonated so deeply with the human psyche? Could there be an encoded narrative within such sounds? A secret language meant to unlock something inside every listener, whether it be dormant memories, subconscious fears, or something altogether more sinister? Every fiber of Alex's being, driven by both curiosity and a visceral impulse to protect themselves from psychological disintegration, sought to rationalize the experience. Technical notes began to populate pages of Alex's notebook, detailing frequency modulations, irregular beat intervals, and the curious distribution of sound energy across the spectrum. Yet the technical details, though meticulously noted, fell short of capturing the overwhelming emotion that had coursed through the room. The experience was not merely an intellectual exercise in sound analysis, but a transcendental journey into a liminal space where the boundaries of embodiment and perception intermingled. Alex felt, as if in a parallel dream state, that the sound had momentarily suspended reality, hovering at the threshold between an encrypted message and an irresistible siren call, luring curious souls into unknown depths. In the reflective silence that followed, Alex couldn't shake the sensation of being changed by the encounter. There was a subtle alteration in how everyday sounds were perceived afterward. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant murmurs of passing cars, even the ticking of an old clock on the wall, all resounded with a strangely shifted tonality, as if the listener's auditory palate had been irrevocably touched by that eerie recording. Outside the confines of the room, life marched on obliviously. Yet for Alex, the experience had initiated a profound internal upheaval. The rational mind clashed with the emotional, with every scientific explanation shadowed by the haunting impact of the inexplicable. This encounter was not simply a professional venture into curiosity. It was a personal reckoning with an element that challenged the very bedrock of known reality. In the days that followed, Alex found themselves developing vivid, unsettling dreams marked by similar sound patterns, a restless soundscape in which abstract shapes of color and shadow danced in synchrony with the mysterious frequencies. Each dream left a lingering residue of surreal dread, accompanied by barely decipherable messages, whispered in a language that hovered on the edge of recognition. Friends and colleagues began to notice subtle changes in Alex's demeanor. A once methodical and composed journalist now exhibited moments of distracted anxiety, quick glances at unseen corners, and a tendency to pause mid-conversation as if reaching out for something just beyond the veil of ordinary perception. The experience of listening to the sound was no longer a solitary experiment. It had woven itself into the fabric of Alex's daily existence. Every mundane noise or fleeting echo was now filtered through the lens of that disconcerting, otherworldly encounter. Determined to further analyze what had transpired, Alex returned to the recordings repeatedly, experimenting with different playback speeds and isolation of individual frequency ranges. With each trial, there emerged faint variations, a barely detectable sequence reversed, a hidden modulation tucked between intervals, as if there were layers upon layers waiting to be deciphered by someone daring enough to listen. This iterative process sparked an obsessive drive, a pursuit of understanding that edged dangerously close to the abyss of unreason. The more Alex sought to demystify the sound, the more it seemed to evolve, as if it were an entity with a will, responding to investigative pressure with a subtle recalibration designed to defy easy replication. One rainy afternoon, while revisiting the spectral data, Alex stumbled upon a curious pattern. A series of low-level fluctuations appeared at regular intervals, almost like coded Morse signals, yet fragmented beyond immediate human comprehension. Could these be random artifacts of an analog error? Or was this another deliberate layer of the mystery, a hidden linguistic message embedded deep within the noise? The notion was both thrilling and terrifying. The idea that an ordinary cascade of sound waves could harbor clandestine signals was reminiscent of esoteric accounts from decades past, secret experiments in unauthorized sonic research, folklore about cursed records, and even whispered legends of music that could warp the human soul. As the hours turned into days, Alex's struggle was internal as much as it was professional. The isolation required to listen, analyze, and document every nuance of the recording had begun to sever the boundaries between work and self. Echoes of that night's sound haunted every moment, an omnipresent threat that the mind would slip, that the fragile line between clarity and delirium might shatter irrevocably. Yet the pursuit of truth was too vital to abandon. The need to understand the sound, to decode its mystery, and perhaps protect others from its insidious effects became an obsession that eclipsed all doubts. In the intimate solitude of these experiments, Alex teetered on the brink of revelation and madness. The controlled environment offered solace, yet every replay of the sound coaxed forth a renewed cascade of emotions, a ceaseless loop of wonder and terror. What had initially seemed like an innocuous experiment had now transformed into a relentless call to uncover a hidden truth. There was no turning back. The sound had insinuated itself into the very essence of Alex's being. Thus, as the night fell once more on the silent laboratory of discovery, Alex realized that this journey was much more than a simple investigation. It was an inward odyssey through layers of sound, memory, and emotion, a testament to the profound, sometimes perilous interplay between data and destiny. The echo of that recording had now become part of Alex's narrative, a ghostly thread woven into the tapestry of each subsequent day, urging them to press ever deeper into the mystery. Over the span of a week after Alex's meticulous experiment with the recording, an ominous pattern began to reveal itself. Word of the mysterious leak had warped into something far more sinister than an online whisper. Reports surfaced all around the city, friends and family members slipping away in broad daylight, neighbors found standing silently in eerie corners, and social media accounts frozen in cryptic declarations. The phenomenon was no longer confined to invisible digital threads. It was manifesting in the tangible world. Alex first encountered the gravity of the disappearances when a frantic phone call rattled the early morning silence. It was from Lila, her colleague from a local news outlet, with whom Alex had once shared a light-hearted debate over folklore and conspiracy. With quivering urgency, Lila explained that her friend, Ethan, an amateur sound engineer with a keen interest in obscure audio phenomena, had vanished after coming into possession of a copy of the sound test. Ethan's enthusiasm for auditory puzzles had been well known, but now his disappearance offered a chilling implication. The audio was not a harmless curiosity. Determined to uncover any connection between these unexplained vanishings and the sound, Alex embarked on a methodical campaign of interviews. The investigative trail led to a small apartment complex on the outskirts of town, a place where one resident, an introverted graduate student named Marisol, quietly disclosed disturbing details. In a modest living room adorned with decades-old books and faded photographs, Marisol recounted the story of her roommate, Colin. Colin had been an ordinary, gregarious person until he began obsessively listening to a snippet of the leaked audio shared on an encrypted forum. Within days, his once energetic chatter faded into a hushed mutter. One morning, colleagues at his part-time gig noted his abrupt absence, and when his apartment was found hours later, it was empty. Colin had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only scattered documents and an uncanny silence. Alex listened intently as Marisol described the strange markings on the walls, symbols that resembled abstract representations of sound waves, almost as if they had been carved out in response to the mysterious frequencies. It was clear there was something more than just an elusive digital file at work. There was a tangible influence seeping into the physical realm. These first-hand accounts began to weave a narrative of terror. The sound was transforming individuals, warping their behaviors until reality itself appeared to fracture. On the streets, whispers of these vanishings echoed in the muted conversations of those who claimed to have experienced bizarre side effects. An aging store clerk in a worn-out uniform recounted late-night encounters with empty streets, lit only by a flickering street lamp. A moment when a passerby, his eyes glazed yet urgently determined, plunged into an alley without word, never to be seen again. At an open-air market, a vendor described how a regular customer, known for her warm smile, began speaking in hushed tones about secrets that no one could possibly know. Within days, that customer had completely disappeared, leaving behind a cold, unanswered question that hovered in the air with the pungency of a forgotten scent. While collecting these accounts, Alex soon discovered that the phenomenon also carried a psychological toll on those who, by mere proximity, had not vanished. A trusted friend of Alex, Remy, had been intermittently found wandering in states of half-conscious trance, muttering details that suggested an internal unraveling. Remy's once vibrant personality had been supplanted by a distant detachment, his eyes often unfocused as if searching for something invisible. In a tearful confession during a quiet interview in a dim park at dusk, Remy recalled that during one of his isolated walks, he overheard voices, soft, unmistakable whispers that recited obscure familial details and intimately guarded confidences. The memory left him visibly shaken and increasingly isolated from the everyday bustle of life. To Remy, it was as if the sound had unlocked a side of him that he never knew existed, an alter ego that carried forbidden knowledge. Every interview, every conversation painted a grim picture, one where the audio file was no longer a mere rumor, but a virulent presence infecting lives. Alex began cataloging these peculiar, distressing events with a mixture of professional detachment and growing personal dread. Late evenings were spent in a cluttered room filled with papers, photographs, and audio recordings, each element telling a part of the full story. Using a combination of handwritten notes and digital logs, Alex mapped the connections, soon identifying a disturbing geographic and temporal pattern. The disappearances were occurring in clusters, often following brief surges in the online sharing of the file. It was as if the sound was a contagious signal, spreading silently through digital channels and manifesting in physical reality. One particularly harrowing account came from a middle-aged librarian named Mr. Halverson. In a softly lit interview, room at the local library, he recounted the gradual transformation he had observed in his co-worker, Janet. Once a jovial and caring presence, Janet began to exhibit definitive signs of anxiety and withdrawal after claiming to have listened to the leaked audio. More unsettling was her newfound habit of whispering the names and personal histories of patrons who visited the library, a detail that left Mr. Halverson unsettled. Janet would suddenly become engrossed in silence, her gaze fixed as though she were reliving deeply personal memories, not her own. And then, as if forced out by an unseen hand, she simply ceased to exist from the myriad faces he had come to know over the years. Mr. Halverson's wrinkled face told a story of sorrow. His voice wavered as he realized that something beyond ordinary explanation was at play. Alex's investigation, initially grounded in the thrill of cracking a digital enigma, had now evolved into a profound meditation on the fragility of human consciousness. The vanishing of individuals and the insidious influence of the sound converged into an unsettling tapestry, one where the digital and the material blended, where unseen frequencies had the power to disrupt the delicate balance of everyday life. Every testimony was a thread in this fabric of mystery, and every lost individual a stark marker of how deeply this phenomenon could reach. Afternoons were spent pacing through urban landscapes in search of any visual clue the sound might have. Left behind, sidewalk inscriptions that resembled the inexplicable symbols Marisol described, graffiti bearing incoherent sequences of digits and tones. In one rain-slicked back alley, Alex found a series of symbols etched into a wall, accompanied by a faint residue that the forensic team later identified as an unusual electromagnetic pattern. Though the source remained undetermined, this clue reinforced the emerging theory. The auditory phenomenon was no accidental byproduct of analog error. It was perhaps deliberately engineered or born from a convergence of human creativity and something distinctly other. The investigation also revealed a broader wave of disquiet within the community. It was as if society itself began to fracture at the edges of normalcy. Local authorities, initially dismissive of isolated incidents, were forced to reconsider when several individuals reported that inexplicable urges to listen, odd visions, and fleeting moments of communication with unseen presences had become distressingly common. A particular case involved a bus driver whose routine was shattered by the urge to detour off his standard route, a deviation that ultimately led him into desolate industrial zones where he was later found, but without a clear recollection of the intervening hours. His fragmented account mentioned an overpowering sound that beckoned him like a distant siren. Late one evening, as neon lights flickered on rain-soaked streets, Alex attended a discreet meeting with a source known only by the pseudonym Echo. In a crowded, inconspicuous cafe, Echo, whose eyes darted with both urgency and paranoia, shared recordings of social media posts, classified documents, and even friend-to-friend messages that pieced together a timeline. This timeline linked the peaks of the sound's online distribution to waves of sudden and unexplained disappearances. It's as though the sound itself draws people into a vortex, Echo confided in a voice so low it barely rose above the clatter of the evening crowd. Once you have listened, you are invited, perhaps not willingly, into a space where your presence is no longer your own. The implications of this revelation struck Alex hard. The sound was not simply a passive artifact, but an active, almost predatory force, advancing through the social fabric. With each new interview and every uncovered detail, Alex felt the noose of inevitability tighten. There was an almost ritualistic progression to the vanishing events. The phenomenon necessitated a leap of faith from the listener, as though crossing an invisible threshold that led past human sensibility into a realm where the normal rules of cause and effect no longer applied. Alex began to suspect that the incident was not an isolated occurrence. It was part of a larger design to disrupt, transform, or even weaponize human perception. More disturbing than the disappearances were the near-disappearing moments, instances where people teetered on the brink of total dissociation, only to claw themselves back with frightening effort. These individuals, bearing permanent scars in the form of incomplete memories and secret utterances, served as living monuments of the sound's potential to dismantle the conventions of everyday existence. As a final piece of the puzzle in this chapter of investigation, Alex sought the expertise of a renowned acoustic researcher. In a cramped, technology-filled lab, Dr. Serena Malik explained that the sound exhibited properties far beyond conventional auditory phenomena. She demonstrated through sophisticated spectrographic analysis that the recording contained anomalous frequency clusters that defied ordinary categorization. "There is an element here that we can neither classify nor explain," Dr. Malik said gravely. "It behaves almost as if it were encoded with a hidden signal, a message designed to trigger responses deep within the human psyche." Her measured tone and the sterile backdrop of scientific instruments could not mask the underlying tension. The discovery that the audio might intentionally target the inner workings of the mind lent further credence to the growing public terror. Night after night, as Alex compiled case files and lab reports, the magnitude of the mystery became impossible to ignore. The vanishing was not a series of isolated accidents. It was a sweeping phenomenon, with a rhythm as steady and relentless as a pulse. Each vanished person, each transformed soul, carried away a piece of the collective human narrative, a stark reminder of how fragile the perception of reality could be when faced with a force that existed somewhere between the borders of science and something altogether more metaphysical. Alex's own resolve began to embody the contradictions of the case, a blend of scientific inquiry tempered by an almost spiritual trepidation for the unknown. Despite the mounting evidence of its profound impact, the sound continued to evade a simple explanation. The research notes, interviews, and obscure recordings were all building toward an inevitable conclusion, that an inexplicable, perhaps even deliberate force was at work. And as the city's neon pulse flickered in the rain-soaked twilight, Every passing moment seemed charged with the possibility of another disappearance, a silent, creeping forewarning that the vanishing was far from over. Standing at the precipice of personal and collective understanding, Alex realized that the investigation had become a shared journey into the heart of human vulnerability. The sound, far from being an anonymous leak, had set in motion a cascade of events that challenged the very tenets of identity, memory, and connection. With every unanswered question echoing louder than the last, Alex resolved to push beyond the veil of silence and into the dark labyrinth, where every whispered secret and every vanished soul told a story of their own. The city thrummed with its routine rhythm, a blend of staccato car horns, distant conversations, and the buzzing energy of dusk. Yet beneath this mundane aurora, an undercurrent of disquiet had taken root. In quiet cafes, on bus rides, even during late-night walks under flickering streetlights, people began to murmur in low, furtive voices. Their words, though hushed, carried an uncanny depth. Conversations slipped into revelations of secrets, intimate details about acquaintances, estranged family members, or even strangers. Details that no one could have known yet were delivered with haunting clarity. Alex's investigation took a sharp turn when a local community center, a once friendly gathering place for elderly residents, became the backdrop to bizarre behavior. Mrs. Delgado, an affable widow known for her lively storytelling, was observed whispering into the air while clutching a faded photograph. When gently approached, she insisted that the voices around her were reminders, tangible echoes of experiences buried deep in time. They spoke of lost loves, unhealed wounds, and hidden acts of kindness or betrayal. Her soft admissions unraveled into detailed accounts, a long-forgotten promise made under a starlit sky, the secret aftershock of a distant argument that once shook her community, and the faint recollections of relief found in unexpected places. But when pressed for names, dates, or places, her eyes glazed over just for a moment, as if the secret was not entirely her own and some other presence had overseen the recollection. Across town, in the narrow corridors of an aging apartment block, a cluster of residents began to exhibit similar disruptions. Mr. Ibarra, a retired schoolteacher, found himself murmuring fragments about a childhood friend he had lost contact with. A friend whose life story he could recount in vivid detail, despite having been estranged for decades. His neighbor, a soft-spoken artist with a gentle smile, spoke of hidden sketches and clandestine meetings with mysterious strangers over coffee in a cafe that had long closed its doors. These whispered confessions, though disjointed and fleeting, hinted at a vast web of interconnected human experience. It was as if the sound had unlocked a communal archive of memories, a ledger of the soul, transmitting a language of secrets that transcended ordinary communication. For Alex, these revelations were as alarming as they were enthralling. The journalist began to suspect that the audio phenomenon was not acting in isolation, but was interwoven with the collective unconscious of society. Each whispered secret wasn't merely a recollection, but a transfer of intimate, almost spectral, knowledge. Tracking these exchanges became akin to piecing together a sprawling crossword puzzle, each phrase or name representing an unseen cue that led deeper into an enigmatic web of shared human history. In one instance, while conducting a discreet interview in a quiet public library, Alex encountered a young man who recounted details of a local tragedy with unnerving specificity. The young man, with trembling hands and a far-distant gaze, described events he had no personal connection with, details of financial ruin, family strife, and even private confessions that seemed someone else's entirely. The accuracy of his narration, down to the minutest detail, raised painful questions about too much exposure. Had the sound granted him, or forced him, access to some forbidden repository of collective memory? Further complicating matters was the realization that this eerie phenomenon had begun to encroach upon the natural boundaries of trust. Faces that were once familiar now carried an unspoken weight, and conversations in hushed tones were laced with the potential to expose truths one might rather keep secret. Neighbors once united by their shared lives now eyed each other with wary suspicion, wondering if their most guarded confidences might inadvertently resurface. Social gatherings turned into tense realms where every word held the dual threat of comfort and betrayal. Rumors spread that those affected might be agents of the sound, that their whispered secrets were not naturally recalled recollections, but messages imposed upon them, hints of a design too deliberate to be random. Amid this landscape of quiet terror, Alex began compiling these accounts with fervor. Every recorded whisper, every nod of acknowledgement, and every furtive smile carried clues. In a meticulously kept dossier, Alex juxtaposed these modern whispers with historical accounts of cursed sounds and folklore legends of voices that could drive listeners mad. Scientific experts, when consulted, provided tentative theories. Some suggested that the phenomenon might be exploiting neurological vulnerabilities, tapping into dormant regions of the brain programmed to recall suppressed information. Others warned that long-term exposure to such uncanny triggers could result not just in memory leaks, but also in irreversible alterations of personality and identity. Yet, with each new whispered secret shared, it became apparent that what the audiophile accomplished was more profound than mere cognitive manipulation. It formed an intricate bridge between past and present, merging suppressed memories with current lives to create an eerie symphony of hidden truths. Alex, whose own nights were now haunted by half-remembered phrases and spectral voices, pondered whether this connecting force was a curse or a twisted form of empathy, a way for society's most private experiences to find resonance. Every individual touched by the phenomenon seemed to bear an indelible mark, a secret scar that simultaneously united and isolated them from the collective normalcy. As dusk deepened into the cold embrace of night, Alex retreated once more to a modest workspace cluttered with handwritten notes, audio recordings, and illuminated photographs of shadowed faces. Each recorded secret added to the mosaic of a society unraveling at its seams, challenged by a force that could bypass the divide between personal privacy and public disclosure. The chapter of Whispered Secrets was a relentless reminder of how fragile human bonds could be when exposed to the raw, unfiltered language of truth. And as the city's pulse slowed in the dead of night, the persistent murmur of secrets echoed through the corridors of every mind touched by the sound, a lingering wail that asked, how much of ourselves can we bear when our inner truths are no longer our own? Late one chilly evening, as the city's neon lights twinkled like secret signals in puddles along empty streets, Alex's investigation took an unexpected turn. A forgotten email, buried deep in an encrypted inbox, led to the doorstep of a man, known only as Marquis. The alias belonged to a former government researcher, whose cryptic communications hinted at a connection between the sound test and a long-dormant military project dating back decades. Marquis claimed that the auditory phenomenon was not a cosmic accident, nor a mere byproduct of modern digital experiments. It was the residue of an attempt to harness sound as a tool of influence. In hushed voice over a secure video call, he detailed a secretive initiative designed to explore the effects of specific sound frequencies on the human psyche. The experiment, he noted, aimed to probe the depths of perception, memory, and emotion. However, it spiraled out of control, eventually being shelved when its unpredictable psychological impacts became too immense to ignore. According to his fragmented recollections, what began as controlled research evolved into something menacing, a mechanism that could render listeners vulnerable to hidden commands, or worse yet, unlock suppressed secrets from the deepest recesses of their minds. Alex felt a chill as Marquis described a series of clandestine laboratories hidden in disused military bases and underground research facilities. These sites, he explained, had been equipped with state-of-the-art audio technology, machinery capable of emitting frequencies so subtly woven into the ambient soundscape that they could bypass the usual perceptual filters. It was in these grim halls of experimentation that a prototype of what would eventually leak online was first conceived. Marquis divulged that the experiment's objective was twofold: to study potential enhancements to cognitive function and to explore the darker applications of sonic manipulation. His voice, raw with both regret and defiance, painted a picture of governmental overreach and scientific hubris, the recklessness of minds unbound by ethical oversight. Fueled by this newfound lead, Alex visited the local archives and digital libraries in search of corroborating evidence. Hours turned into days as dusty documents, faded photographs, and fragmented audio files emerged from forgotten vaults of institutional history. A recurring pattern began to surface. Several research projects from decades past, shrouded in secrecy, referenced experiments with psychoacoustic phenomena. One file in particular detailed tests performed during a period of heightened Cold War paranoia. The report mentioned the use of controlled sound waves to enhance alertness and manipulate attention, hinting at an unsettling awareness of how sound could be weaponized to push individuals toward heightened emotional states. While the project had been officially abandoned, whispers of its success and its lingering dangers continued to circulate among those who had once worked on. The discovery of these files forced Alex to rethink the nature of the sound test. Was it simply a rogue artifact born from an overzealous digital subculture? Or had its genesis been seeded in the labors of scientists and engineers intent on experimenting with the human soul? Each document, every grainy image pinned to yellowed, archive paper, lent credence to an intricate conspiracy that extended far beyond the realms of random chance. Alex's subsequent encounters with insiders deepened the intrigue. Had a discreet meeting in an abandoned warehouse repurposed as a safe haven for whistleblowers, a former acoustician, who preferred to be identified only by the codename Echo Smith, revealed that similar sonic experiments had been replicated in several parts of the globe. Echo Smith's testimony described nights spent in cramped, sterile laboratories lit only by the hum of machines, where researchers manipulated sound frequencies in controlled bursts. Their aim had been to tune the human mind, a phrase that now sent shivers down Alex's spine. In a voice trembling with memories of the past, Echo Smith recalled an incident during one such session where an experimental frequency unexpectedly triggered a cascade of involuntary memories and emotions in a test subject. The subject, overwhelmed by the deluge of personal recollections, had collapsed into uncontrollable convulsions, an image now seared into Alex's memory. In parallel, Alex discovered hints of a forgotten art installation that seemed to mirror these sonic experiments. An enigmatic sound artist known only as Nocturne had decades earlier created a series of installations that blended audio with visual symbolism. The installations were designed to leave the observer in a state of introspection, their inner narrative stirred by mysterious sounds that mimicked the subconscious whispers of memory. Critically lauded by select art critics at the time, these installations took a more sinister turn when reports emerged of viewers experiencing intense, almost involuntary recollections of forgotten moments in their lives. Although Nocturne himself had receded into obscurity, his work was rediscovered as part of Alex's investigation, further blurring the line between deliberate artistic expression and unethical experimentation. As two seemingly divergent threads converged, the remnants of a military-grade experiment and the eerie echoes of an avant-garde art project, Alex began to assemble a timeline of revelations. The evidence suggested that over the years, various entities had either appropriated or inadvertently unleashed these sonic experiments. There was the unmistakable impression that the digital leak was not a spontaneous act of rebellion, but rather a carefully orchestrated disruption, an invitation for society to confront the precarious boundaries between emotion, memory, and control. Whether by governmental lapse or artistic malice, the result was a phenomenon that had now taken on a life of its own. Alex's mind raced with questions. What had been the intended purpose of the original experiments? Who benefited from the knowledge they unleashed? And was it possible that a deliberate network had been constructed, one in which state, corporate, and artistic ambitions converged over the promise of manipulating human perception? These questions no longer had simple answers, but the urgency to unmask the truth had never been greater. In a solitary moment of reflection, as rain drummed a steady beat against the window of a nondescript safe house, Alex resolved that uncovering every layer of this conspiracy was essential, not just to grasp the origins of the sound test, but to prevent its potential misuse in reshaping society without consent. With a determined heart, Alex began drafting a plan to connect with international experts, promising to journey deeper into the labyrinth where sound, secrecy, and human destiny converged. It began subtly. Alex first noticed the odd lapses when, during an intense late-night session of piecing together conspiracy emails and faded archival files, they experienced a momentary blank, a pause in thought so complete that it felt as if a part of their life had been excised. At first it was a fleeting gap, scarcely more than a hiccup, but soon these lapses became longer, harboring hidden memories that evaporated before Alex could steal a glance at them. In that quiet paralysis, a creeping sensation emerged, as, though the sound had begun to erode the very anchors of identity, days turned into weeks, and while the investigation into the sound test grew ever more labyrinthine, Alex's own reality began to fracture. During interviews, they would find themselves struggling to recall the exact sequence of questions asked, or witness expressions that once burned vivid in memory, now clouded by insidious uncertainty. A passing remark, a shadowy phrase in a whispered conversation would trigger a cascade of memories from childhood, each rendered in unnervingly surreal detail. It was as if the sound was slowly infiltrating their mind, unspooling tightly coiled recollections at moments least expected. One evening, alone in the dim light of a cramped study, Alex sat before a wall of scattered notes and flickering monitors. The once comforting hum of the equipment now resonated like a dark chorus in the background. The recorded voices from the mysterious audio, those disembodied murmurs and half-forgotten phrases, had begun to invade moments of silence outside the controlled environment. In the quiet, their thoughts were interrupted by soft echoes, laughter that seemed out of place, the distant sound of whispered voices speaking in a language only half remembered. These weren't simply echoes of the original recording. They were voices of Alex's own making, or perhaps voices that had always been there waiting to breach the surface. At times, Alex felt as though the audio file was not confined to a single medium. In the solitude of the night, the unmistakable sound of a familiar ringtone or the rustle of wind outside would sync with an internal melody, a subtle reminder that every auditory input might be a fragment of the same disorienting phenomenon. On one particularly unsettling night, while attempting to compile a final report on the evidence, Alex found themselves staring at a half-finished sentence in their notebook. "I remember when," followed by a gap. The incomplete thought was unnerving, as if the crucial moment of their recollection had been siphoned away into an invisible reservoir. Sleep, once a refuge, became a battleground for conflicting emotions. Alex's dreams twisted into vivid sequences, where disembodied voices recited fragments of conversations from a lifetime they could no longer trust entirely. In some dreams, they found themselves wandering endless corridors of a shadowed palace, easy labyrinth where each turn whispered personal secrets and deep-rooted fears. In others, the dreams bore a chilling resemblance to nights spent in the sterile glow of recording devices, where every pulse of sound seemed to encroach further upon their sense of self. Waking up provided no escape. The sensations clung to them like an indelible residue, leaving Alex to question whether the boundaries between dream and waking reality had permanently blurred. The transformation was not confined solely to the solitary moments of investigation. Friends and colleagues began to notice changes in Alex's demeanor. Remy, once a loyal confidant, remarked how Alex's conversation often broke into sudden pauses or uncharacteristic quietness, a pensive silence that suggested they were listening to something beyond the present. The once methodical reporter now seemed to wander through days with a distant gaze, as if perpetually ensnared in a dialogue with an unseen presence. In public, a fleeting expression of fear or recognition would flash across Alex's face, quickly masked by a stoic exterior, as they forced themselves to continue the investigation. But the price was evident. Every encounter, every interaction, left a lingering uncertainty about what was remembered and what was unwittingly omitted. The toll on Alex's mental fortitude reached a crescendo during a solitary night in a dilapidated safe house. Rain hammered on the tin roof, and the relentless cadence of droplets blurred into a kind of accidental percussion. In the oppressive darkness of the room, Alex pored over the collected evidence, audio files, scanned documents, and painstakingly transcribed interviews. As they traced patterns in the frequency data, a peculiar realization emerged. The sonic patterns in the leak seemed to mimic the erratic rhythms of their own faltering heartbeat. A sudden, inexplicable chill crept over their skin, accompanied by the sensation of being observed. It was then that Alex distinctly heard their name whispered from the depths of the silence, a voice not quite their own, yet achingly familiar. This moment marked a turning point. The boundary between the external conspiracy and the internal collapse began to vanish. Alex's investigative notes, which once provided clarity and structure, now mingled with jumbled impressions of dreams and half-heard conversations. The relentless quest for truth had led them into a dark mirror of their own mind. Every discovery about the enigmatic sound was paralleled by a personal descent into uncertainty. Here, in the solitude of the falling night, Alex was forced to reckon with a pivotal question. Had the sound unlocked a secret corner of human perception, or had it forcibly pried open a door to parts of the self best left unexamined? Desperation drove Alex to seek solace in the only refuge they could muster: contact with Dr. Serena Malik, the acoustician who had once offered clinical insights into the phenomenon. In a quiet, overcast cafe, the two met amidst stacks of disjointed research and weary expressions. Dr. Malik's face, etched with lines of concern, confirmed that the frequencies in the recording fell disturbingly close to patterns observed in experimental studies, focusing on memory erosion and deep emotional triggers. There are instances, she confided in a hushed tone, where exposure to certain frequencies has been known to induce temporary dissociative states, even in those with otherwise stable psyches. It's as if your mind learns to filter out what it can no longer process. The implications were stark. The sound was not only a tool of external manipulation, but a mirror into the innermost recesses of the human mind. Returning from the meeting, Alex felt the weight of this duality, a merging of the investigation with their very identity. The eye, safe house, once a sanctuary for meticulous study, now bore witness to a fractured soul. In the mirror hung on the wall, Alex's reflection seemed distant, as if viewed through multiple layers of translucent glass. The subtle tremor of self-doubt was now a constant companion, a reminder that every revelation about the sound might also be a revelation about the unknown depths of their own consciousness. As the days stretched on, Alex began documenting not only the external evidence, but also the strange internal experiences. Pages in the worn notebook filled with half-formed thoughts, desperate annotations, and sketches of labyrinthine corridors echoing with long-forgotten voices. They recorded the precise moments the sensation of disconnection set in, correlating these with particular sonic patterns from the leaked file. Each entry was a reminder of the steep price of uncovering a truth that extended beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding. In quieter moments, Alex would find themselves questioning whether the investigation had become both an external quest for clandestine truth and a personal descent into madness. The voices, the memory gaps, the act of forgetting and then painfully recalling, it all merged into a single haunting symphony. And yet, amid the disarray of thoughts and fractured recollections, there was a persistent, almost defiant spark of determination. With every lost memory, a new question arose. With every disembodied whisper, the need to understand grew stronger. The night before what would be the next phase of inquiry, Alex sat in a cluttered study, their fingers tracing patterns on the surface of a weathered notebook. Outside, the city murmured with the usual clamor of urban life, yet the inner silence of the room pulsed with the remnants of the sound's influence. At that moment, a decisive thought crystallized. To truly grasp the enigma of the sound test, Alex would have to confront not only the conspiracies woven outside, but also the depths of their own unraveling mind. In a final act of both resolve and vulnerability, Alex recorded a voice memo, a raw, unfiltered admission of fear and determination. "I feel the sound within me, reshaping the edges of who I am," the memo began, the tone wavering between resolve and despair. "But I must know. I must discover what lies beneath the silence, even if that journey demands I confront the darkness within myself." That whispered confession, sent into the void of apprehensive determination, marked the beginning of a new phase, a descent into realms where the boundary between the sound's influence and personal identity was irrevocably blurred. Thus, as the night deepened and the rain subsided into a heavy silence, Alex acknowledged the dual battle waging within and without. Their journey, once a pursuit of an external conspiracy, had now become an intimate odyssey through the corridors of the mind, where memory, sound, and conscience converged, leaving behind no clear divide between reality and the haunting void that threatened to devour it. Alex's journey had led to a point of no return. Equipped with painstaking research, fragmented memories, and the mounting pressure of countless disappearances, Alex finally deciphered that the elusive source behind the sound test lay hidden in an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city, a relic of Cold War-era experiments and forgotten art projects. Under a lead provided by a wary insider known only as Nocturne's Echo, Alex set out into the cold night, determination battling the creeping dread that had become all too familiar. The approach to the complex was surreal. The heavy iron gate screeched as it reluctantly gave way, as though protesting the intrusion into a domain meant for secrets. Under a chill, overcast sky, Alex's footsteps echoed in the emptiness that stretched before them. The building itself was a decaying labyrinth of rusted pipes, shattered windows, and cavernous halls that hinted at a once grand purpose. Every surface retained a whisper of its past, a resonant vibration, a faint murmur of machines long silenced, and the heavy hum of power that might yet endure in forgotten corners. Inside, the environment was thick with the residue of experiments that had straddled the line between genius and madness. Flickering fluorescent lights revealed remnants of technical schematics, scattered audio equipment, and cryptic handwritten notes pinned to peeling walls. It became apparent that this very place was both a laboratory and a mausoleum of ambitions. Past, where sound had once been harnessed as a tool, a weapon, and a medium of artistic expression. In the quiet that reigned over dusty workstations, Alex found a central control room where a large, archaic console still lay connected to a maze of cables. On one of the aging monitors, a looping visual display revealed sound spectrograms that eerily resembled the patterns Alex had documented during their own experiments. A sudden surge of static wave cascaded through the room, startling Alex into a state of alertness. It was then that a soft, measured voice emerged from the darkness, a voice that seemed both mechanical and imbued with deep emotion. "Welcome, Seeker," it intoned. The speaker, emerging from behind the console, was a gaunt figure draped in a faded lab coat. With a measured calm, the figure introduced himself as Dr. Orion Voss, one of the original architects of the project that had inadvertently given birth to the sound test. His eyes, behind thick-rimmed glasses, were somber with the weight of remorse and resignation. Dr. Voss explained in clear, deliberate tones that the experiment had once aimed at unlocking latent cognitive abilities and storing memories in sound. It was a pursuit of human potential, a mapping of the soul through frequencies, but its progress soon revealed a terrifying side effect. "We discovered that sound could awaken more than mere memory," Voss confessed. "It could stir shadows, incite a hunger for forbidden truths, and even unravel the delicate tapestry of the mind." He spoke of the frequency manipulations crafted to evoke deeply personal recollections and the unforeseen chain reaction that rendered some listeners mute in the face of overwhelming, distorted revelations. The project had been abruptly shut down, its archives sealed and its technology scattered, until the accidental leak had reawakened those dormant frequencies to the world. As Dr. Voss unraveled the thread of the experiment's origins, the room itself seemed to respond. The air vibrated with a chorus of accumulated sound, the echoes of countless past trials converging into one final, overwhelming resonance. Alex felt the weight of every vanished soul, every whispered secret, and each fragmented memory that the sound had ignited. In that charged moment, the conversation transformed from historical confession to urgent moral reckoning. Dr. Voss, his voice now tinged with both desperation and resolve, revealed that the sound was evolving. No longer was it confined to an obsolete piece of technology. It had taken on a life of its own, fueled by a mix of human ambition, latent memories, and the unfinished symphony of suppressed truths. It seeks to redefine what it means to remember and to forget, he warned. For Alex, the revelation was both a culmination and a crossroads. The final confrontation was no longer about exposing a government experiment or a forgotten art piece. It was about reclaiming control over a force that had begun to fracture the collective psyche. With a steadying breath, Alex faced Dr. Voss and the console, their own memories and experiences echoing within the cavernous hall. "How do we stop it?" Alex asked, voice low yet unwavering. The answer came as a quiet murmur, almost lost amidst the hum of the machinery. Acceptance, integration, and the will to choose what remains untouched by the silence. In a dramatic moment that mirrored the delicate balance between chaos and clarity, Alex connected a portable audio transmitter to the console. Following Dr. Voss's guidance, they initiated a countersound, a carefully calibrated frequency intended to neutralize the dissonance embedded within the original recording. As the device hummed to life, the oppressive static receded, replaced by a clarion pulse resonating deep within the very foundation of the building. Simultaneously, the recorded static shifted, and for a brief, charged moment, the room filled with a pure tone of clarity, a sound that resonated like the heartbeat of truth. For several excruciating minutes, nothing else existed but that pulse, steady, deliberate, and anchoring. It was as if every shard of shattered memory, every whispered secret was slowly being gathered and harmonized into an even greater, more coherent silence. Even Dr. Voss's eyes glistened with a mixture of relief and melancholy, knowing that this single act might not reverse all that had been done, but could at least stem the tide of further descent into madness. In the aftermath, as the counter-frequency stabilized, a profound silence descended over the complex, a silence that was not empty, but full of potential renewal. Through the steady cadence of that harmonized pulse, Alex perceived a faint promise that even the most dangerous echoes of the past might one day lead to understanding rather than destruction. Dr. Voss, now a man divided between culpability and hope, handed Alex a set of meticulously compiled documents detailing the origins of the experiment, protocols for safe sound exposure, and finally, a personal note urging future generations to honor the delicate balance between knowledge and wisdom. With the revelation complete, Alex left the complex with a new sense of purpose. The mysteries that had once threatened to consume them now formed the foundation for a cautious optimism, a commitment to guard against the unchecked allure of dangerous secrets and to preserve the fragile tapestry of collective humanity. The maze of conspiracies, whispered secrets, and personal dissent now converged into a singular truth. Sometimes the most unsettling sounds carry a lesson in both warning and healing. In the closing echoes of that night, Alex understood that the journey was far from over. The counter-frequency might delay the cascade of further disappearances, but society's relationship with these sound waves would continue to evolve. As dawn broke over the horizon, Alex set forth with the documents and a renewed determination to share the story, a quest to illuminate that even in the dark corridors of human memory, light once kindled has the power to echo endlessly. In the weeks and months that followed the fateful night at the abandoned complex, a new rhythm began to pulse through the city. The calibrated counter-frequency continued its silent guardianship, a steady beacon preventing further spirals of chaos. Yet its success was bittersweet. Across neighborhoods and quiet corners, people emerged from the long shadow of inexplicable vanishings and whispered secrets with eyes that held both quiet determination and subtle wariness. Alex, now bearing the weight of revelation and the hope of redemption, returned to a life forever altered. The meticulously compiled documents, an archive of mismatched memories, government secrets, and experimental testimonies, became not just evidence of a conspiracy, but a living testament to the potential for healing in the face of perilous curiosity. These papers were distributed in carefully organized symposia, shared with acoustic scientists, psychologists, and even artists who saw in them echoes of an aesthetic too profound to ignore. In these gatherings, the story of the sound test took root as a cautionary tale, an enduring reminder that every innovation, however well-intentioned, holds the potential to unearth hidden parts of the human soul, with consequences as unpredictable as the frequencies themselves. In quiet moments of solitude, Alex revisited the abandoned control room in memory. The chamber's silence, once filled with ominous static, now resonated with the harmonious pulse of that counter-frequency, a sound that had become synonymous with cautious hope. Each day, the reflections of fading neon and the rustle of leaves. In the morning, wind recalled not only the night of revelation, but also the slow mending of shattered recollections. The city's pulse, its myriad lives once driven to the brink by secrets too weighty to bear, now beat in a more deliberate, thoughtful cadence. People around Alex began to speak of the experience as if it were a distant echo, a surreal chapter of collective memory rather than the dark present. In conversation at community centers, cafes, and even local council meetings, whispers of the sound were balanced with shared resolve and introspection. Some believed that every significant disruption of normalcy offers the chance for cultural metamorphosis, a call to cherish and safeguard the human mind. Others used the experience as a pivot, inspiring regulations on digital experimentation and a renewed understanding of the delicate interplay between human perception and technological invention. For her part, Alex became both a guardian and a messenger, sharing the journey through essays, interviews, and public readings designed to work impeccably with text-to-speech systems. Such presentations emphasized the story's dual nature. It was a tale of conspiracy and horror and a counterpoint, one of courage, acceptance, and new beginnings. Every word intended to honor the call for mindful innovation, echoed with the truth that sometimes the most unsettling secrets could, in time, transform into lessons for a wiser future. In reflective moments, Alex wondered if the sound was ever truly eradicated or merely paused, like an unresolved note in an unfinished symphony. Every so often, in the hush of a rainy evening or the quiet pulse of dawn, faint echoes would stir in the background. But now those echoes no longer carried the terror of lost identities. Instead, they were met with a measured acceptance, a reminder that our sensory worlds are complex tapestries, and each seemingly discordant thread might reveal its own hidden beauty when woven with care. The transformation was evident not only in the rebalanced lives of those affected, but also in the overarching bond of shared humanity. The phenomenon, initially heralded as a digital anomaly capable of driving people to the edge of madness, had passed into collective memory as both a warning and a promise. It underscored the immense responsibility that came with curiosity and innovation, a call that the truth, once let out, must be met with compassionate resilience and an unyielding commitment to protect the sanctity of human thought. In the final analysis, the legacy of the sound test was not found solely in the technical documents or the fleeting moments of terror in darkened rooms. It was found in the quiet strength of those who dared to confront it, those who listened, remembered, and ultimately chose to integrate the shadowy notes of their past into a broader, more humane symphony. That integral choice, to honor both the light and the dark, became the true counter-frequency against despair. And so, as the world moved forward into a future rich with both cautious innovation and newfound unity, the sound became a quiet emblem of endurance. It was a testament to humanity's capacity to reclaim its narrative from the clutches of oppressive secrets, to transform corruption into clarity, and to find, even within the echoes of silence, a harmony that would guide them into tomorrow.